They've had this from World War II, the Red Hill fuel storage facility, about 200 million gallons of fuel sitting there under a mountain in rusted tanks right over the aquifer. So, right over the drinking water is where they had these fuel tanks. Each of those tanks are about 18 stories high, 13 million gallons of fuel apiece they hold. Um, and again, only 100 feet separates the top of the water table, the drinking water source, and these fuel storage tanks. The Navy's own studies show that this has been leaking fuel into the ground basically since the facility's beginnings in
And
the
Pearl
early
Harbor. It's been leaking into Pearl Harbor.
into Pearl Harbor.
Yes,
Yeah,
and on Pearl Harbor Day, you know,
yeah. Today is Pearl Harbor Day. That's a great. Today is the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. I should have led with that.
so it seems like we'd
Yeah.
honor the veterans that lost their lives and the people that were, fought in the war. It seems like we'd honor them instead of just having ceremonies that we wouldn't maybe
Right.
pour fuel into the Pearl Harbor.
And I also want to bring up because the Navy has basically acknowledged that there's high levels of petroleum, lead, oil that they have found leaking. But they always said, but we have groundwater monitoring. So we have wells that do groundwater monitoring. So although these levels are very high, again, oil, petroleum, diesel fuel, that they're above, quote, the allowable limits, which in my view is a joke. Why we even have allowable limits? There should be no diesel fuel in your water anywhere. But they always said our monitoring doesn't show that it's in the drinking water. Well, people have in Hawaii, we're finding out now, have been having similar symptoms for decades. So it seems to me, based on the stories I've covered, they could say what they want, maybe, but how do we know that their testing was completely accurate? That they were completely transparent about what was in the water? And you don't know what's in that water until people start smelling it, or it's there's too much of a leak. There's too much toxins for them to cover. So, question: for all we know, this has been leaking and making people sick for God knows how long.
Right. And importantly, what you're talking about with the levels, that's another trick that they use. And that's what's happening with PFAS. They're able to say in one state the level is this, in another state the level is this. So instead of having the precautionary principle like Europe has, we go state by state to decide what limits of these chemicals are allowed. And actually, when I was talking to Abby, I kind of misspoke about one thing. I said, well, the level of benzene is supposed to be 0. And then I kind of went, I should have double checked that. And I went back, and the allowable limit is 5. It's the goal to have 0. And I was just like you're saying, the goal? No, you should have no benzene in the water. So
And that's also, I want to stress that because they say, for example, the allowable limit of lead in drinking water is 15 parts per billion, but that's not actually a public health measurement. That's a corrosion measurement. So a lot of these, like the EPA, whatever they come up with for the allowable level of XYZ, you always got to look underneath the hood because really there is no, every person's different. So maybe if I was exposed to 2% benzene, I don't know, maybe I'd be okay. But another person with immune problems or whatever else, it would destroy their system even with that allowable limit. So it's pretty insane that they even have a measurement for what's an allowable limit of diesel fuel or jet fuel in your water.
right, and it might affect someone who has immune problems. If there's acute poisoning like is happening in Red Hill, but you can be perfectly healthy, and it's just some genetic thing and some luck of the draw means that is going to get your cell and damage your bone marrow, I mean, you can be the healthiest person in the world, and you're just the person that is going to give leukemia to. And that's one of, I think, the most alarming thing, the urgent thing in Hawaii right now is because the Navy let the water get to the point where people are getting acute poisoning, which is terrifying. And by that, having that level, they can taste and smell the fuel, and they're actually posting pictures on the Joint Base Facebook page of them using a lighter to spark the top of the water. Because that's happening, now the Navy is saying, when people ask at these town halls, mothers, asking, well, can I bathe my child? And they're saying, well, you're your own best censor. Some people are more sensitive than others. So just be your judge. Talk to your doctor. They're using all these things and telling people to use their best judgment about whether to bathe their child in hot bath water, where the vapor, the steam will poison the children.
Right.
So they let it get to the worst point, and now they're using that worst point to buy themselves time to cover up what they've done and to try and figure out how to keep that fuel in those tanks.
Right.
Because
And
that's the goal.
right. And by the way, I mean, the other element of this is in Camp Lejeune, it was surrounding people that got made sick, as well as the military on the Marine Corps base. Here, it's also people in the Navy that have been poisoned. It's also, in addition to the surrounding communities around Pearl Harbor. So the United States, in this case, the Navy, in Camp Lejeune's case, the Marine Corps, they've been apparently knowingly poisoning their own service members. In America, we just fetishize the military. It's like, cannot criticize, cannot cut the military budget. Veterans Day, like, thank you for your service. And, I think for the actual soldiers, I do thank them. But the United States Navy, Marine Corps, and God knows how many, the Army, they've been essentially knowingly allowing leaks and poisoning of active duty and veterans. So what does that really say about this, narrative of, we hold sacred our service members?
It says it's bullshit. It's crap. It's and the thing is that it's not necessary. They can do what they need to do in their, let's just say whatever, whether you agree with their goals or not, and a lot of people don't. But they can meet their goals without poisoning people. They just have to spend more money, and they have to do things that they don't want to do. So it's not only poisoning active duty service members and their families, it's doing it unnecessarily. They've spent billions of dollars on, half a bomb. You know what I mean? And then they say, this is not cost effective when it comes to putting a lab on the island where they're keeping those tanks above the water source. So
Right.
they had to ship their samples to the mainland, and they were damaged. Guess what? We had a lot of damaged samples in Camp Lejeune too.
Right.
So it's certainly odd, and you hear there was a wife at one of the town halls, and she was saying, my husband's on a submarine. I can't talk to him, and he's on a submarine under the water. And he thinks that myself and my child are being taken care of by the Navy, and we're not.
Right.
And they really had no answer for her, and they never have an answer, because a lot of people on active duty have this kind of feeling like that's what they signed up for. We signed up to put ourselves at risk. But people have to realize it's not just active duty, it's their families too.
Right.
In addition to in Red Hill, the rest of this island who are at great risk. And I think one thing I see changing is I see more and more active duty service people and family members who are not afraid to criticize the leadership, not afraid to say you're doing this, criminally. So that's at least one positive thing, is that people are getting to know the truth, which is the sad truth that they cannot trust
Right.
the Department of Defense of the United States to keep them safe.